Desire. It whispers, it lingers, it pulls at the edges of your mind when you least expect it. Are you afraid to listen? Or does it ignite something deep inside you? From the moment we take our first breath, desire shapes us, guiding, haunting, and sometimes tormenting us. Society tells us to suppress it, morality warns us to control it, yet history proves that the most passionate, powerful, and dangerous moments of humanity have been driven by its force. But here's the real question. Is desire your greatest enemy, or your untapped superpower? Freud believed repressing it could make you sick. Jung saw it as the key to unlocking your true self. Mythology, film, art, everywhere you look, desire is the force that creates and destroys. And now it's your turn to look within. Are you ready to step into the dark waters of your own longing? Or will you slam the door shut and pretend you never heard the whisper? Let's dive in. There's a ghost that follows you. It doesn't speak, not in words, but in whispers of longing, flickering in the background of your thoughts. You might suppress it, shove it into a dark corner of your mind, pretend it doesn't exist, but it waits, watching, hungering. This is desire, the shadow behind every choice, the pulse beneath every hesitation, the reason you dream of things you dare not say aloud. Desire is among the most powerful forces in human nature, and yet it remains one of the least understood. We speak of it in hushed tones, draping it in secrecy, sometimes even shame. But where does it come from? What does it want? And what happens when we refuse to listen? To unravel this mystery, we must journey deep, beyond the masks we wear, beyond even our conscious selves, into the landscapes of psychoanalysis, mythology, and culture, where the heart of desire beats strongest. In this first part, we will explore how desire operates within the mind, drawing from Freud's psychoanalytic theory and Jung's concept of the shadow. We will also examine how desire manifests in everyday life, from the mundane to the dramatic, and how repression often twists it into something darker, more dangerous. By the end of this section, we will begin to see that desire is not merely a passing impulse, but a fundamental force shaping our identities and destinies. The nature of desire, a restless hunger. Imagine a child reaching for a flame. The adult intervenes. No, you mustn't touch that. It will burn you. The child hesitates, hands suspended in the air. The fire calls to something ancient inside them. Restriction only sharpens the hunger. This is the essence of desire, an ache made sharper by denial. From the moment we become aware of the world, we are trained to suppress. Our early desires, to scream, to grab, to taste, are met with limitations. Some are practical. We mustn't touch fire because it will hurt us. Others are imposed by society. We mustn't express anger too loudly, mustn't reveal attraction too openly, mustn't crave too greedily. And so we learn to subdue, to hide, to pretend. But what happens to these hidden desires? Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, believed that nothing in the human mind ever truly disappears. Instead, it retreats beneath the surface, into the unconscious, where it festers and transforms. The desires we refuse to acknowledge do not vanish, they mutate. Freud's model of the mind, the cage, and the beast. To understand the mechanics of desire, we must first understand Freud's division of the psyche into three parts. The id, the raw, instinctual part of our psyche. It is chaotic, demanding, filled with desires for pleasure, power, and primal satisfaction. The id does not care for consequences. It only knows what it wants. The ego, the mediator, the part of us that deals with reality. It negotiates between what we want and what is socially acceptable. The superego, the moral enforcer, built from societal norms, parental teachings, and internalized rules. It is the voice that says you must not, the keeper of shame and restraint. Desire originates in the id, surging upward like magma, but as it reaches the surface, it is met by the superego, which tells us to push it back down. The ego, caught in between, struggles to keep the balance. When a desire is too dangerous to act upon, it is repressed, locked away in the unconscious. However, repression comes with a cost. A desire denied does not disappear. It finds other ways to surface. It might slip into dreams, disguised in symbols. It might erupt as an unexplainable obsession, an irrational fear, a sudden rage. Or it might seep out through sublimation, transformed into art, music, literature, or even religious devotion. But in its most extreme form, repressed desire can twist into neurosis, compulsion, and even violence. Jung's shadow, the monster in the mirror. If Freud's model explains the mechanics of repression, Jung's concept of the shadow explains its consequences. According to Jung, every person has a shadow, a part of themselves that contains all the aspects they refuse to acknowledge. The more we deny our desires, the darker and more volatile our shadow becomes. Imagine a person raised to believe that anger is unacceptable. They never raise their voice, never express frustration, always smiling, always polite. But then, one day, someone cuts them off in traffic, and suddenly, an explosion of rage erupts. The shadow has broken free. This is the paradox of repression. The more we deny an emotion, the more power it gains over us. The same applies to desire. A person who suppresses their romantic or sexual impulses might find themselves consumed by jealousy, obsession, or guilt. A person who denies their ambition might sabotage themselves, afraid of their own hunger. Desire in everyday life, the silent puppet master. Most people believe they are in control of their decisions, but in reality, much of what we do is influenced by hidden desires. The career we choose, the people we are drawn to, the things that frustrate or inspire us. Beneath each of these lies an unconscious force guiding our actions. Consider the phenomenon of unspoken attraction. Two colleagues work together, neither acknowledging the undercurrent of tension between them. They convince themselves it is nothing, and yet their words linger just a little too long. Their conversations stray toward the personal. They find excuses to be near each other. The energy builds, unspoken, unacknowledged, until one day it spills over, either into a moment of passion or into an irreversible break. Or take the example of ambition. A person raised in a strict, self-sacrificing household may grow up believing that seeking personal success is selfish. They deny their hunger for achievement, convincing themselves they are content. But the desire doesn't fade. It turns inward, manifesting as resentment, bitterness, or self-sabotage. Desire will not be ignored. It either finds expression or it finds destruction. The thin line between passion and obsession. When desire is acknowledged and integrated, it can be one of the most powerful creative forces in existence. It is the force behind every great novel, every symphony, every breakthrough invention. It is the fire that drives lovers to cross continents, that fuels revolutions, that makes life burn with meaning. But when desire is denied, it can twist into something monstrous. History is filled with stories of unrestrained desire leading to destruction. Kings who lost empires for forbidden love. Geniuses who collapsed under the weight of their own obsessions. Ordinary people who destroyed their lives chasing something just out of reach. So how do we navigate this treacherous terrain? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst who dared to tread into the depths of the human unconscious, warned of the dangers of suppressing the shadow, the dark, primal urges buried beneath the surface of the civilized self. Among the most potent forces in this hidden realm is lust, the fiery, untamed drive that society fears, disciplines, and chains in its relentless pursuit of order. But what is the cost of this repression? What happens when desire is not acknowledged but buried alive? The answer, as history, psychology, and personal tragedies reveal, is as profound as it is terrifying. The shadow's revenge. Jung's concept of the shadow explains that all elements of our psyche that we deem unacceptable, anger, greed, ambition, and most notably lust, do not disappear when denied. Instead, they retreat into the unconscious, where they mutate into distorted forms, seeking expression in ways we least expect. The repressed always returns, but never in the shape we anticipate. Lust denied does not dissolve. It disguises itself as moral superiority, erupts as compulsive vice, or manifests as inexplicable rage. The most pious become the most perverse, and the ascetic becomes the predator. The evidence is everywhere. History's greatest scandals are not found in the alleys of indulgence, but in the corridors of restraint. The preacher who denounces desire is often the very one caught in scandalous affairs. The ruler who imposes puritanical laws is frequently the one drowning in secret indulgences. The corporate executive who suppresses his needs under a veneer of professionalism finds himself unable to resist the temptations of power, leading to corruption and destruction. The shadow will not be denied. It will claw its way into the light through compulsion, neurosis, and at times outright madness. The disease of denial. Repression breeds disease. psychological, emotional, and even physical. Jung saw repression not as a virtue, but as a pathology. When sexual desire is ignored, it does not die, it transforms into anxiety, depression, and paranoia. Studies show that societies with strict sexual taboos often experience higher rates of psychological disorders. In individuals, the toll is personal but no less destructive. The person who denies their desires loses touch with their authentic self, resulting in a fragmented psyche, dissonance between what they feel and what they show to the world. Sexual repression has been linked to guilt-ridden fantasies, obsessive behaviors, and an inability to form deep emotional connections. It fosters shame, the most insidious of poisons, which seeps into every aspect of life, making love an impossibility and intimacy a terrifying prospect. People trapped in this web either shut down emotionally or rebel so violently against their repression that they swing to the opposite extreme, engaging in reckless indulgence, addiction, or self-destruction. The cost to society. But the cost of repression is not borne by individuals alone. It seeps into the fabric of society. Jung warned that what is denied in the personal psyche finds its way into the collective unconscious. When societies suppress sexuality, they create cultures of hypocrisy and violence. The most puritanical regimes often produce the most perverse underground movements. The more a culture insists on purity, the more it breeds secret deviance, double lives, and, at worst, systems of oppression that punish desire while exploiting it behind closed doors. Religious institutions, authoritarian states, and rigid moral frameworks all claim to protect virtue, yet they breed the very thing they fear. The more we repress, the more we distort, the more we deny, the more power we give to what we are trying to eliminate. A world that refuses to acknowledge lust does not eradicate it. It weaponizes it, leading to cycles of abuse, hidden desires, and societal fractures that no law or doctrine can mend. The way out: integration, not suppression. Jung did not advocate for unbridled indulgence, but for conscious integration. The only way to break free from the grip of repressed lust is to acknowledge it, understand it, and channel it constructively. To recognize one's desires without shame is to reclaim one's power. To own one's shadow is to prevent it from owning us. This does not mean surrendering to every impulse, but neither does it mean blind rejection. It means understanding the energy behind lust, not as something to be feared, but as a force that can be directed toward creativity, passion, and meaningful connection. It is the fuel behind art, literature, innovation, and spiritual transcendence when harnessed with awareness. Suppression creates monsters. Integration creates wholeness. The final toll, when repression becomes fate. To repress is to relinquish control. Those who do not face their desires consciously will be ruled by them unconsciously. The cost of repressed lust is not just personal suffering, but a wasted life, a destiny dictated by fear rather than fulfillment. In Jungian terms, what we do not make conscious will return to us as fate. The lover who denies passion becomes the cynic. The priest who fears temptation becomes the predator. The artist who buries desire becomes the critic who destroys others' work. And in the end, perhaps the most tragic cost of repressed lust is this: the slow, silent erosion of the self. A life lived in fear of one's own desires is a life half-lived, and in the end, there is no greater regret than the realization that one has never truly lived at all. If you loved the knowledge in this video, please like and subscribe to the channel for more. Cheers.